The United Nations says nearly 1 million Palestinians have fled their homes in the Gaza Strip in the week since Israel launched its military response to the killings and kidnappings by Hamas. The entire enclave has been hit by Israeli strikes from Gaza City in the north to Rafah in the south. The border crossing there at Rafah with Egypt has remained shut since the Hamas attacks last weekend. Crowds of Palestinians and foreign nationals have been gathering at the crossing after news that an evacuation route may temporarily open. Our correspondent John Donnison sent this report and a warning that you might find some of the images in his report upsetting.
Outside the main hospital in Rafah, ice cream trucks. The morgue is full. Some of the dead have been here for 2 days, Yasser Katab tells us. These freezers are meant for food, he says, not bodies. And this is right in the south of Gaza, where people are now being told to evacuate to. Hundreds of thousands are now heading in this direction. But Egypt says it won't open the crossing even for foreign nationals until Israel agrees to allow aid in. And Hamas also controls this border and has a say on who is allowed out. The nearby United Nations school is packed with those seeking shelter. But it was already at full capacity before this latest evacuation order. As Palestinians, what did we do for this to happen to us? Hanan Al-Darbi asks. She tells us she ran out of the house barefoot with nothing when Israel bombed her neighbourhood and came straight to the school. At noon today, many were praying, one would think, for better times. Many of those here are children, still smiling despite it all. Around half Gaza's population is under 18, and some are old beyond their years. Ramez Barhoum is just 15. This is his 5th war. I can barely stand it, he says. And look around you at all these kids. Ask them, do you want to live or not? We just want to be secure, he goes on. Our dream is to live. That's all we want. John Donnison, BBC News.
Well, the World Health Organization says an order by Israel to evacuate more than 20 hospitals in northern Gaza is tantamount to a death sentence for some of the sick and injured. The WHO has expressed particular concern for people on life support and newborn babies in incubators. Health centres in the south are also at maximum capacity. Tens of thousands of civilians are moving ahead of an expected Israeli ground offensive in Gaza. Earlier on, I spoke to Dr. Natalie Roberts. She's the executive director of the humanitarian organisation Médecins Sans Frontières UK. She described the grim situation for the people of Gaza.
It is, as you've described just now, pretty catastrophic. I mean, we've had a week of relentless bombing, so thousands and thousands of bombs dropping down on a very small piece of land in the north and the south of Gaza. So producing many dead, but many more wounded. At the same time, with electricity and water having been cut off now a week ago, we're getting to the point where really there is no access to clean water and no electricity to continue running the medical facilities anyway. And now in the last couple of days, these evacuation orders, and that's just led to absolute chaos. You know, we have 300 staff in Gaza. Some of them have managed to move to the south, are trying to transfer patients to the south. Some of them have no choice but to stay behind in the north and try and continue to run medical care in the north. Either way, they're describing utter chaos and a sense of despair.
Well, I wanted to talk a bit more about that because we've heard about journalists being targeted. We've heard about airstrikes on civilian infrastructure. How dangerous is it for your teams on the ground?
I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. The majority of our teams are Palestinian, so they come from Gaza, they live in Gaza, they've never seen anything to this scale before. We're seeing ambulances being hit, we're seeing medical facilities being hit. And as people were moving south yesterday, they were saying they could hear the bombs, they didn't feel in safety. So they're incredibly worried about being caught up in this, about being injured themselves. Many of our staff have lost family members. Our international staff as well, they're stuck in the same situation, either having to stay in the north or choose to move to the south. And And the same scenario applies to them. Even once they get to the south, there's nowhere for them to stay. They're trying to find a place on a floor somewhere in a school, on a mattress. There really is this sense that there's no way out, there's no escape.
Médecins Sans Frontières is known around the world for its aid work, keeping away from politics. How easy is it for your teams to operate around some of these border crossings, like close to Egypt, where the authorities there have shut things down?
I mean, yes, we're very used to working in war zones. We're very used to negotiating our way into war zones and to get our supplies in, to get our staff in. And currently, at the moment, the only border crossing, the Rafah border crossing, is closed to us as it's closed to everybody else. So we can't get supplies in, we can't get staff in, and we can't get our staff out. So, we're facing the same situation as everybody else at the moment, despite the fact we've been working in Gaza for such a long period of time.
For the people who are fleeing, heading for that border crossing, the Rafah crossing, what kind of support do they need?
I mean, first of all, they need to have some reassurance that they can travel in safety, that they can move in safety on the roads. And we saw yesterday that doesn't seem to be the case, that the bombing continues even on these safe roads. We need them to be reassured that once they get to the crossing, they will be allowed to cross in safety, that they'll be met with some sort of welcome, and with humanitarian aid if they manage to enter Egypt, for example, and also a reassurance that people can return home. I think there's a lot of concern that people don't want to leave their homes, and they particularly don't want to leave Gaza, knowing that they might never be able to go back. So obviously, the reassurance of safety and the reassurance of, you should be able to go home. At the same time, if people have chosen to stay at home and people have chosen to stay working in the hospitals in Gaza City, for example, they're terrified that now that means that they're labeled as a target. And there needs to be a reassurance that hospitals will still be protected, that medical care will still be protected, even if people have stayed in the north of Gaza.
That was Dr. Natalie Roberts from Médecins Sans Frontières. Well, the US has ordered a second aircraft carrier group to the eastern Mediterranean. According to American officials, the USS Eisenhower is part of American efforts to deter hostile actions against Israel or any efforts towards widening the war.